Hello, welcome to Mustard Sport. This is Talk is Cheap, part 2. And we're going to bring on the big debate with my two studio guests, who are EDP sports journalist Mark Armstrong and football analyst Matt Wallace. The international break is a bind for some teams, but it's good for us. It means we can look at the table and see how the Premier League is shaping up 11 games in. Can we, Mark? It's only 11 games in. Does the table mean anything yet, do you think?
I think it's quite a good indicator of where teams are and certainly how they've started. I mean, if you do look at the sort of bottom half of the table, then you can pretty much deduce that Palace have gone. They're relegated. They haven't even got a manager. So I consider there's only two places left. Whether Norwich are going to be involved in that, who knows? That's the big question. I would think that it is going to be a bit of a struggle. The real interesting one for me, I think, is going to be Hull. I mean, they've started very well. Steve Bruce has done a great job, but you can't, with the players that they've got in that squad, you've got to assume they're going to struggle at some point. So I think that there'll probably be another one eventually. Sunderland have got a little bit of a bounce from Gus Poyet's appointment, and Stoke they're still struggling to adapt to Mark Hughes's new way of thinking. Whether they can adapt quickly enough, who knows? I think they could be the other one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We are going to stick to the bottom half of the table because sadly Norwich's 11 games haven't been as good as Southampton's, so we're kind of backed into that situation. How do you see those? There are some interesting teams that Mark's mentioned there, Matt, but I mean sort of the ones who are genuinely really struggled.
In trouble, I'd completely agree that Palace are gone. You can write them off, I think, straight away. I would personally, even though they beat Man City, I'd write off Sunderland.
They're very good at winning 1-0 against Man City.
Yeah, they've done that like 4 years in a row.
It's crazy.
Them. Yeah, but I don't think there's a great deal of quality in the team. They've got a very good striker, but not really much to set up. So I think it's one from a group.
Okay.
And we're in that group. It's us and Stoke and Fulham and so on. I personally think Hull will be fine. I thought before the season they don't have the greatest squad. I certainly think Cardiff have a better squad than them, but I think Steve Bruce is a better manager. I think he knows he's never going to be spectacular, but I think he knows how to keep teams in the Premier League. He'll grind out results at home. He'll get the odd shock away like he has already, like Newcastle, for example. I think they'll be fine. So I think you're looking at us, Stoke, Fulham, Cardiff. Those teams. We're going to be in a mix with them.
It'd be interesting what happens with Fulham. I think they've got the players to get out of it, but what's going to happen with Martin Jol? Well, I think he's on borrowed time at the moment. They certainly look a really beaten side at the moment.
He looks like he's beyond caring.
He does.
He looks like he's sat there, he just doesn't care. And when you look at the players that are up front, like Berbatov and Ruiz, they look like they don't really care either.
It's very interesting with the managerial pressures because the fixtures that come up don't really get taken into account. I think most of the teams at the bottom of the half of the table would go to Anfield and lose 4-0. But it still sort of jacks up the pressure on Martin.
We'll go to Anfield and lose about 8-0.
Well,
it's the timing, isn't it, a bit?
Well, we'll go into the fixtures because it is coming up, that one quite shortly. Sunderland's an interesting one. I mean, there's obviously signs of life there now. Stoke, I've seen, I think they've been awful, really.
Yeah, I thought they started the first couple of games. They did got a couple of 1-0 wins, and I thought they were adapting to Hughes quite well, and they've been really, really poor since. They have a lot of the ball, which is very un-Stoke-like, and they do nothing with it. And when you're still playing, John Walters, I think, has the longest unbeaten streak of starts in the Premier League, and when you're playing him week in and week out, you're in trouble.
It's an interesting one. You obviously think Hull will be fine. There's a lot of teams that have come up and done very well in the first half of the season, then struggled to a certain extent. Norwich did it when they came up and had enough on the plate already to stay up. Do you think that's going to be an issue maybe come January and the second half?
The harsh reality of the Premier League sort of does dawn on teams after a while. You can teams are used to winning that have come up and they kind of get a bit downtrodden after a while, and it's whether the managers can try and maintain that confidence that they've got from the previous season. I don't think Hull have got the players that are going to be able to do that.
Do you think Cardiff have?
I think they've got a manager a very good manager. I think they'll be down there, but I think they'll survive.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, that's probably where the early days of the table helps. It's still settling down in that way. Just bringing it maybe more specifically to Norwich now, with 11 games in, who has particularly impressed you, and who maybe have you been most disappointed with, I suppose, Matt?
Well, I think our player of the season so far is Johnny Howson. I think the closest is Leroy Fer, but I don't really think it's that close at the moment. I think Howson has been excellent. Disappointment, I think a lot of people will look to Basong, but I think it's worth keeping in mind that he had no pre-season. I mean, the guy came into the side with an injury. He's clearly looked not fit throughout. He's mistake prone because of that. He looks casual. I think resting him or dropping him, whatever way you want to look at it, was the right idea. But I thought he was brought back into the side too quickly. You know, after the game where Ryan Bennett played so well. And I'm not
Stoke.
I'm not a huge Ryan Bennett fan as it goes. I don't think he's a particularly great defender, but he did well. You know, you can't really drop players that are performing, and that happened. And I think it's pretty harsh. And you know, how would you feel as the player to think you take your chance, but you still get dropped? So I think they've kind of rectified that and say, you know, here's a run of games for him to see how that goes. I do expect Basong will be back, but I think he just needs a few weeks out to really get fitness. Because I think him and Turner will be our best pairing. Yeah,
it's an interesting one with his pre-season, and it was a knee operation, which are never the easiest things to sort out, I suppose. How about you, Mark? Someone really impressed, or not quite been at the level?
I would agree with House. I also like Fair excites me. He really does. He does flatter to deceive sometimes, and you really wish he would impose himself on games a bit more, but he will learn to do that. I think Houghton's made that point. I mean, if you're going to build a perfect midfielder, he has got everything. It's cliche, but he has. Biggest disappointment, I'd probably say Pilkington, because he just frustrates me. He just constantly gets injured, and I think he's a good player, but he's just so injury prone that sometimes I'm not sure it's worth persevering with him. You just can't rely on him. He just breaks down too easily.
I think in the disappointment category, I think it's worth putting, until the second half of the other day, Robert Snodgrass, who's been quite poor this season. He seems to have a radar only for goal. So when he gets within 20 yards, he'll have a pot shot, usually miss. And you see our strikers, there's the stat about they've had about 6 shots on target, you know, this season. That's not necessarily their fault. You know, you see them get into good positions, they'll peel off defenders, they'll look in like really sharp, and then Pilkington or Redmond or Snodgrass will just take a pot shot. And I think there needs to be a little bit more selflessness from the wingers and to looking for strike, and I think Snodgrass has been guilty of that a lot.
Okay, just finally a quick look. Come New Year's Day, Norwich City will have played everyone, so then we'll have a proper halfway table, which is always a very good indication of how things are going. Norwich's next 6 fixtures, which we'll be able to see on the screen. Now, Newcastle away, that game at home to Palace. I mean, will Palace have won since then? I mean, we had a must-win, didn't we, Matt? You know, against West Ham. Same again.
Yeah, you certainly get a lot more must-wins when you're at the wrong end of the table. You know,
every week it feels.
They come thick and fast, and that really will be one, because Houghton was under so much pressure, and he's bought himself about a month because of the international break and an away game. No one's going to sack him between now and then you come up against the worst team, possibly the worst team in the Premier League since Derby. This is, you know, any other team will take it to Palace and will go out there to batter them, and it'll be a sign of where Norwich are as to whether we are confident enough, or the manager is confident enough to do that, or whether he'll just treat it with the same sort of respect he would with other games.
Mark, this is officially Norwich's 10-game unbeaten run time, only a year on. A big period, because you know they haven't picked up many points, certainly before the weekend.
I can't see him doing another 10-game unbeaten run, unfortunately.
They've got to go to Anfield in the middle, that's probably why.
And even Newcastle as well next, so I think that's a very difficult one. I mean, Palace is the key one, isn't it? That's the one that it is the must-win game, and if Norwich don't win that, then the pressure will ratchet up on Houghton again. The fans will get on his back, and there's got to be some sort of end game to this. Really, I hope that he does get the win for himself, because I think a lot of fans are waiting for him to fail, and that's not really nice to see. It's harsh because he's such a nice fella that you really do want him to succeed, not only for Norwich but for himself as well.
Fantastic. Mark, Matt, thank you so much for your time and your opinions this week. Much appreciated. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back ahead of the weekend's trip, the long old poke to Newcastle for Norwich City as they return to Premier League action. And don't forget, after the game at St James's Park, we'll be wanting your 3 up front verdicts as well. But in the meantime, have fun and goodbye.